Welcome to Five or Flop, a podcast for the best and worst historical fiction has to offer. I'm your host, Erin.
And I'm Grace, and each week we'll be reading a different historical fiction book to see if they're a five or a flop.
Our theme for season 4 is Reading Rainbow, and that's right, we are reading queer LGBTQ plus historical fiction novels this season.
And today we are reading
The 30 Names of Night by Zeyn Joukhadar.
Wow, that is one... We have a lot to say.
We have a lot to say, but before we actually say anything about it, I would like to call out that I believe the DC Library, they have a couple different book clubs, and I believe their queer book club just had this as their book of the month in March.
They did, and also they have it on display at Kramer's, one of our local indie bookstores, because as we are recording this, it is Arab American Heritage Month, which pertains to the topic of the book.
Exactly, so that is super exciting. Unfortunately, this episode will not come out during Arab American Heritage Month. However, we are observing in spirit here on the pod.
And also, you should be reading diversely all year round.
Exactly. I will say I really love when books and libraries highlight for specific months, but I think they should, keep highlights all the time.
Yeah.
Which most of them do.
We love our libraries.
Yes. Okay, we spent a lot of this weekend together, actually. So I think we wanted to talk about the first of our many exciting events from the weekend.
Yes, it was attending Jeopardy Live.
And let me just say, I definitely thought we were going to a live taping of Jeopardy.
I didn't, but I didn't really know what we were going to.
We went with a group of 5 of us. No one really knew what it was.
No, what I thought it was going to be a thing where they were on tour city to city and they had a program planned out. That was not it. They were in DC basically for one reason, and that reason was because Ken Jennings was the Grand Marshal of the Cherry Blossom Parade.
Yes, so they went to all the Big Four DC... not even just the Big Four. They went to all the DC colleges.
They covered a lot of ground.
They threw Catholic in there, too. They're not the Big Four, but they count, They covered a lot of college ground, a lot of ground. They brought back a past winner who lives in DC for the podcast. They brought back some other famous Jeopardy guy who was really funny and delightful.
Sam and Drew Goines, respectively, for our Jeopardy heads at home.
Yes. However, afterwards, there was an interactive competition. And Grace, when I say I am so upset still about how this went. So there were several hundred people there. And up until Final Jeopardy, I was in fucking 4th place.
Erin and I both had high highs and low lows. But for me, mine was less devastating because I was in 5th place, at the very beginning for 4 or 5 questions in a row. I was very much sitting pretty. And then I decided to bet everything on a daily double and lost. So then I was like, okay, I'm out. But you were close for most of it.
I was between 2 things for the final, and I gave the stupider of the 2 options. And of course, I was wrong. I only wagered half my amount, so I think I would have been docked from top 10 anyways. However, I think the top 10 did get a free tote bag, so I am actually very unhappy about that.
I could do very well on Jeopardy based on purely the questions, but it's the betting parts that I think would take me out.
I get stressed out.
Yeah, I can't do the math right. Mm-mm. And Ken Jennings told us all that on Jeopardy, you don't get a calculator to do your math. You get a piece of paper and a pencil.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So that's even harder.
However, we both need to take... Well, you take the Jeopardy test already. I have not taken it in years. I think when I took it, it was either the high school or college one.
Okay, I took the college one until I aged out of it, and that includes through grad school. But I knew in grad school they weren't going to take me because...
You went to VCU?
They're very snooty about the colleges that they take on College Jeopardy, I'll just say that.
So if I had stuck with library school at UNC Chapel Hill...
Oh, yeah.
I could have gotten it.
But UNC Chapel Hill, even that, you'd show up and you'd be from the stupid school.
I know.
Then the other 2 people would be from MIT and Harvard.
But I'd be the prettiest one there, so it's fine.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so we had a blast.
We did. We had a very good time. Now, they didn't ask any book questions that I remember.
No, and we kept our eyes peeled because we know a lot about historical fiction.
It was very DC-centric, so if we had been a fellow traveler's question, I probably would have gotten it wrong because I didn't pay attention to that book.
Unless the answer was Foggy Bottom.
Unless the answer was Foggy Bottom. Absolutely. I previously lived there. What are you reading now, though?
I have recently read a book called The Abandoners, and it is a nonfiction book translated from Spanish, so I felt very smart reading it.
Okay.
And it's a series of essays about mothers who abandon their children.
Oh.
It's an interesting, for whatever reason, just the author was very interested in this topic. She was a woman who has children and is raising them. but some of the essays were about historical figures. Some of them were about like representations in media. So I would highly recommend trying to get your hands on it. It's not super easy. They have a copy of it in the DC library. So I know you could get one. I don't know about
fabulous.
Our listeners.
Okay. Well, our listeners, a good number of them do live in the DC area.
Yeah. So that's a tip for them.
Well, I'm not really reading anything at the moment because, spoiler alert, we are filming 3 episodes in one sitting right now. So I don't want to like give away the only book I'm reading that's not pod related. However, I do have a pod season 4 gift for you that I forgot to bring to your house when we filmed the premiere.
What? For those of you listening at home and not in the room right now, Erin has just handed me a rainbow bookmark.
And it says Book Nerd. It's from Out of Print, which is a store that I love.
I follow them on Instagram.
I have a matching one. And since we're reading Rainbow this season, I thought we should represent for the LGBTQ community.
I'm so touched. I won't even dog-ear my books like I normally do.
Oh my God. I used to be such a dog-earer, and then Santiago's mom like hand drew me bookmarks, and I'm like, well, these are beautiful. I have to use these. So it has completely broken me out of my habit, but I thought this was perfect for the season.
That's so delightful. Thank you. I'm so excited to start a book that's not an ebook, so then I can use it.
Amazing. I actually, and I'll talk about this with you off air, just started one of the season books on audiobook.
I think I saw on your Storygraph.
And I am enjoying it.
And we don't plug our own Storygraph a lot. We plug the Storygraph Reading Challenge. But if you would like to follow at Grace Hand on Storygraph, then you can know what I'm up to.
I have to look at what mine is.
I think it's just Erin Marie Harvey.
I think it is. If you want to follow me also on Instagram with that handle, sure.
Erin is much more consistent in her branding than me.
It is Erin Marie Harvey. All right. Should we get into 30 Names of Night?
Yes. And we have gone a long time without talking about anything what the book is about other than that it somehow relates to Arab American Heritage Month.
And that's kind of the only thing I knew about this book going in. And I will say, even reading the synopsis, I didn't read the synopsis that I'm about to read. I think I read a different version of it. Mm-hmm. It did not give me much. And let's preface up front, this is kind of halvesies historical fiction.
Yes, this is a 2-timeline book. And we checked beforehand. We had a discussion. I was like, Erin, I've started this book. It goes back and forth between being contemporary and historical. Do we think that counts? And we decided yes.
When we get to historical accuracy, I'll tell you the direction I kind of took the historical accuracy piece. I liked how I did it. Before I begin the synopsis, I do want to call out the main character, Nader. The author has since clarified that Nader is actually non-binary, not a trans boy. The synopsis I'm going to read says trans boy in it. I am not sure if this was just a miscommunication with the publication, or maybe the author, realized this about the character afterwards.
Yeah, I was confused seeing that in your notes because that is not what was implied to me by the text of the book. We don't it's still definitely possible.
Yeah.
Based on the text of the book, I thought that Nader identified as a transgender man, but that doesn't really change my opinions of the book. So good to know up front, I guess.
But let's get into the synopsis, just bearing that in mind as I go through and read.
Okay.
5 years after a suspicious fire killed his ornithologist mother, a closeted Syrian-American trans boy sheds his birth name and searches for a new one. He has been unable to paint since his mother's ghost had begun visiting him each evening. As his grandmother's sole caretaker, he spends his days cooped up in their apartment, avoiding his neighborhood masjid, his estranged sister, and even his best friend, who also happens to be his longtime crush. I did not get the crush vibe from the book. That might have just been me. The only time he feels truly free is when he slips out at night to paint murals on buildings in the once thriving Manhattan neighborhood known as Little Syria.
I'm going to stop you there for a second. I feel like that part is basically all you need to know. And I just want to flag for the audience, we're about a third of the way through.
This is a long synopsis.
It's intense. You may continue.
One night, he enters the abandoned community house and finds the tattered journal of a Syrian-American artist named Delilah Z, who dedicated her career to painting the birds of North America. She famously and mysteriously disappeared more than 60 years before, but her journal contains proof that both his mother and Lila Z encountered the same rare bird before their deaths. In fact, Lila Z's past is intimately tied to his mother's and his grandmother's in ways he never could have expected. Even more surprising, Lila Z's story reveals the histories of queer and transgender people within his own community that he never knew. Realizing that he isn't and has never been alone, he has the courage to officially claim a new name, Nader, an Arabic name meaning rare. As unprecedented number of birds are mysteriously drawn to the New York City skies. I'm sorry, that is like an insane line. Nader enlists the helps of his family and friends to unravel what happened to Lila Z and the rare bird his mother died trying to save. Following his mother's ghost, he uncovers the silences kept in the name of survival by his own community, his own family, and within himself, and discovers that the family was there all along.
Drink some water, Erin. You deserve it.
Yeah, sheesh. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Too long. Yeah. I mean, that is what happens in the book.
I think we can't really say too much about the synopsis without going into what we want to say. So let's just get there quickly.
We'll circle back.
So about Zeyn Joukhadar, and apologies if I mispronounce at any point, I am speaking quickly so we can get on to the subject matter of the book. So he wrote this book and The Map of Salton Sea in 2018, as well as poems, articles, essays, blah, blah, blah. He's been published in a number of magazines, which I always think is cool. I don't think we have a ton of like magazine or literary journal authors all the time. So kind of a newer author, you know, seems more breaking out into the literary world. I do not think these will be his only 2 books. I definitely see him writing more. This book won the Lambda Literary and Stonewall Book Award. I hadn't heard of those before.
Actually, I am pretty familiar with Lambda Literary. I have read a few of their other award winners before, so I enjoy them.
Anything come to mind?
I read a couple memoirs. They give out a lot of awards. Okay. So in like a lot of different genres, and then for every like a lot of the different identities under the LGBTQ umbrella. Okay, very cool.
So Zeyn is a trans author. He was not publicly out on tour for the Map of Salton Sea book tour, but he was privately so and out to family members. Mm-hmm. And again, newer author. I definitely don't think we'll see the last of him, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Well, I have not read his other book, and I don't think you have either.
No, I haven't. I want to say I've heard of it, but then I just think I'm thinking of Rudis Apetys of Salton Sea.
Oh, probably.
So
Yeah. Well, we know that's our queen.
Yeah, so I don't think that's correct at all. I don't think I have heard of this one, actually.
Okay.
Judgments come based on the book and characters within the book rather than any real historical figures they may have been based on, and spoilers ahead.
Okay, let's go.
All right. I wanted to get through that quickly because the synopsis gives away like
it's so detailed that we can't talk about it in abstract, so we just have to talk about the book.
Yes, exactly. I think you and I had the same difficulties with this book, but I think parts of it still worked better for me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what was really strong for me here.
Okay.
I thought the prose was excellent. Mm-hmm. And I'll go into this more later. It was definitely at the expense of the plot at points in time.
I was going to say, I can't even really give the prose credit because I feel like it was so overprivileged from the story that sometimes I would read a sentence, and I never think this way. I would read a sentence and I was like, this single sentence was crafted separately from all the other sentences around it. I would read one sentence and be like, that doesn't make sense with the previous paragraph.
It's like the author was in the shower and he was like, oh, that's a good one. I got to write that down.
Yeah. Like it was beautiful, but it wasn't, it didn't gel. And I'll circle back to that a little bit later when I'll let you finish your thought first.
So why the prose worked for me is I think I have a lot of issues with the plot. But what works for me really well is because some of the themes in this were so strong. So for me, the first one that always is going to stick out to me is grief. If grief, I think, is really well written, really realistic, it sticks with me and it immediate positive marks for the book. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought the descriptions of grief surrounding the mother, and then also just like as that ties into immigration, you know, leaving Syria, all of that, I thought that was all beautifully executed. And I thought the prose served that very well. However, that was the majority of my most positive thoughts with this. And while I will say, I don't think this is the last we've seen of the author, and I'm glad for that because I think the author has a lot of incredible potential. It's kind of like what we talked about with the Davenports.
Yes.
Where it's almost to me,
you have the opportunity to grow and improve.
Exactly. And I would love to read some of Zeyn's like poetry work or article or essay work. I think that could be some really excellent stuff. I almost wonder, and I can't say for certain because I have not read anything else, if the author is not more suited to that type of format.
Well, I was going to say what I wrote down as I was reading it, I was like, this book should have been a long narrative poem.
Yeah.
Like an old-fashioned, like epic style Paradise Lost Jabberwocky narrative poem.
That would have been great.
And it would have been so much better. I think he would have been forced to cut down on a lot of the plot elements because I was trying to list out what the major plot elements are, and there's easily 4 of them. And this book's not that long. And I will agree with you that I think that Zeyn Joukhadar is set up for future success. This book is very well reviewed.
Yeah.
I will not be reading any more of their work, unfortunately. The longer I read this book, the more fed up I became with it. I wasn't actively reading it. Kind of the same thing that you said about Fellow Travelers. Not that it's the worst book that's ever been written, because that's certainly not true. Yeah. The thing I kept thinking was, what is the point in me reading this? And that's a very strong negative thought coming from me. I'm like, there's no point in me reading this. What? Of course, other than to talk about it on the pod.
Yeah, which I've had a few times this season. I didn't necessarily have it with this book, though. I think there were things that worked for me better. I think one of them... Actually, I don't really know your thoughts yet on the dual timeline. I loved Lila's sections. I really enjoyed her sections, and I think that I found myself, like, looking forward. I did not care about Nodder searching for the bird and all of that. Like, I did, or even searching for Lila at the end. I just did not care.
Yeah. So basically, well, this is a dual timeline book. Mm-hmm. It's maybe 50-50. It might be 60% Nodder, 40% Layla. Yeah. The Layla Z sections are of her, she's this artist. She immigrates over from Syria. And it's episodic. It's her life. She leaves a love behind in Syria. She finds a new one in the Syrian community in America. There are, without getting into spoilers that we'll explore a little bit later, a few different LGBTQ identities involved between her and her various loves. So that was really good. But then all of the other plot elements were crammed into Nodder's sections. Yes. And this is, again, like, not a long book. Like, it's like a 300-page book.
It was a pretty quick read.
So there's the elements of the hate crimes against the Syrian community. Little Syria is being raised by the city. Nodder's own gender exploration and journey, looking for this rare bird, and all of that. It's so much.
And trying to find Lila.
And it's not paced well.
And you know what? I feel it could have been really narrowed down. Like, we did not all of these elements should have been happening at once. The bird should have been cut. I did not understand why the bird was important at all.
It's so clearly the central symbol of the book is birds. And the reason that Nodder is looking for this bird, because it's a rare bird, the only people who have seen it are Lila and the Nodder's mother, who passed away before the events of the book. Mm-hmm. I think the point is supposed to be that through his grief, Nodder is trying to vindicate his mother by proving the existence of this bird. But that through line is not connected enough. It's about the bird in a literal sense. It's not enough about the bird in terms of what the bird symbolizes.
I thought it was going to become more of, like, him trying to vindicate his mother by, like, because his mother was an activist and trying to save the community center and all of that.
Yes.
I thought it was going to be something more like it was going to turn into his journey to, like, get involved in the community, that sort of stuff. But it really stayed about the bird.
There's so much here that could have been more if the plotting was better, if the prose was more balanced with the plotting. Everything felt like it was at one tempo the whole time. There are a couple different times when crazy dramatic things happen, like someone's small business is set on fire as a hate crime.
Which, hang on, I have to sidebar for 1 second. Arson is used as the act of hate crime in this book a lot. Is there, and I don't mean to sound ignorant, is that a more common form of hate? It just felt like there was a lot of arson happening, and I don't know if that's, like, a proportionate to, like, the amount of, like, hate crimes in communities, or if it's, like, other forms.
I have no idea.
There was a lot of arson in this, but, like, a lot of arson.
Yeah, but because everything is kept at so even a tone, like, I would be reading along, and then the paragraph would be like, oh, and then we went to help, clean up at the bakery that had been set on fire. And I was like, wait a minute, that should be its own thing. Like, a new chapter, a new, like, something else. And then every so often, at, like, midway through the book, Nodder makes friends with someone else who is transgender or non-binary. And that's very helpful and affirming for him. Because for most of the book, actually, I feel like this is important to say, and this I thought worked extremely well. For the first half, 2/3 of the book, Nodder is a completely nameless protagonist.
Yes.
You do not ever learn what Nodder's birth name was.
Which I think is very important and very poignant.
Yes. It works very well. It's good, clear symbolism for your true identity is the one that the author wants the reader to know. Every so often, this other non-binary friend who's helping them on the search for the bird will bust in and say something about the bird, and every single time I had completely forgotten about it.
Because I forget that character's name. That character's grandfather like knew Lila Z.
Yeah.
Was an ornithologist. There was also like a lot of, and that character was in school for ornithology.
Every single person that we met was a birder. I'm like, okay, I know that you're in community with people who are like you, and that's what community is, but you don't just meet all these random people and they're all ornithologists. I'm unfortunately coming into this in the position of someone who doesn't like birds.
As we know.
Yeah, well, you know, I feel like a good book could get me to care about the birds.
Yeah, I actually... Another book bird story. I forget the name of, I think it was called H is for Hawk. I think, don't quote me. But it was a memoir, and it was a grief memoir about a woman who had lost her father. So I picked up, I'm like, perfect for me. I'm going to read it. But it was about like, falconry?
Oh,
and
yeah.
like hawks and like falcons and hawks and all of that as like a metaphor. And I just like, the birds were such a turn off for me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I cannot read this.
You were like, that's not what I would do in your situation.
I'm like, not like
for you.
Okay, so now that we've talked about a little bit of everything of what's in here, should we kind of give like a little like more detailed overview of Lila's side of things?
Yeah, let's, because that did work better for me. I wouldn't say if that part of the book was like just completely in its own bind up, I probably wouldn't give it a 5, but it would be okay. I liked it.
It was fleshed out for the purposes of being a dual timeline book. Nodder sections were what was lacking.
Yeah, and they were too much was put on Nodder's sections.
Oh yeah.
They were kind of bloated. They were heavy.
Yeah.
They were trying to do too much.
So I think Lila's sections worked perfectly for what they needed to do. They were just not counterbalanced.
Yeah, I agree. But basically, the framing device around them essentially is that in the present timeline, Layla Z is this artist. She's known for these paintings of birds, been missing for years. And we'll get back to that because I felt so duped by the Layla disappeared thing, which is not true.
Pissed me off.
Oh my gosh. Actually, we'll talk about it now. It's not a spoiler that at the end that they find her.
Also, I realized I may have been switching between Layla and Lila, and it's because I know people by both of those names.
Forgive us.
Forgive us if we're going back and forth.
She just moved to Brooklyn.
Yeah. She just moved.
She was married to the guy that she was married to before, like, quote unquote, disappearing. Like, they just moved to Brooklyn.
Like, it was not, like, it should have been a big reveal, and it wasn't. Like, it should have been so much harder to find her.
No, you could have been, like, went off the grid or, like, stopped producing art or, like, all of this. I thought she died or something. Or, like,
I
was
thought she was going to be dead. She is old, and she does have Alzheimer's.
But, yeah, no, she just moved to Brooklyn. And no one ever thought to look there, I guess.
No, and they brought Tata at the end to go see her. They didn't explain to Tata at all how they found her.
Okay.
Or, like, well, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Real quick, okay. The Layla story is that Nodder finds Layla's journal in one of the buildings slated for demolition in Little Syria that his mother was trying to save. Again, every time you say a sentence, you just have to say, like, 10 more things.
Yeah.
And so what the Layla sections are is the journal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Layla narrating her own life as her life, occurs. She's in Syria. She falls in love with another woman in Syria.
Yes.
They are separated when Layla's family immigrates.
Yep.
They come to New York. They are in New York. Layla falls in love with a man, turns out to be a trans man who left his family in Syria to start a new life as himself in America.
Yep.
They're together. They have this long marriage. They have children, etc. And then it turns out that the woman that Layla loved in Syria was Nodder's grandmother.
And I clocked that the first time she was like, I was in love with the girl.
It was not, well, even when I was, like, in the journal, you get no information, and I'm like, who's the only other old woman that we know in this book?
Yeah.
The grandmother.
Yeah.
So it was not a surprise.
You get a lot of detail about, like, Layla coming over and her family and all of this and, like, what she does when she's there. Why is Nodder's family in the U.S.? Why is Tata in the U.S.? Did I miss that?
I think they might have said, but I do not recall.
I might have missed it. But if so, it wasn't, like, I felt like it didn't need to be his family's immigration story.
No.
I don't think it needed to be.
Maybe,
I think it should have been, like, more than enough for me to remember.
I think, they were from the same village, Layla and the grandmother, and Layla's family came because there was war. It was impending war. So maybe it just, the grandmother came over later. Like, everyone eventually kind of emptied out of this village. I don't know.
But at the end, when they find Layla, and I don't even remember how they find her. When they find Layla...
I guess they just look her up in the phone book. I don't know.
Probably. And they bring the grandmother, and the grandmother's just there. And when did they explain any of it to her?
Well, here's the other thing. They privilege, again, the bird. They show up. This poor woman has Alzheimer's. They're like, hi, you don't know us, or you don't know any of us.
Talk to us about this bird.
Talking to her children who are like trying to take care of their mother with Alzheimer's. They're like, do you have the painting of the bird? And I hate to say it, because Nodder's whole quest is very noble, which is like, the ornithology community thought my mother was crazy for being like, I've seen this bird, and everyone else is like, everyone knows that bird doesn't exist.
Which I guess could be a big thing in the ornithology community.
Yeah, don't ask me how it works. I'm sure that there's some real assholes that are birders. But Nodder's whole thing is like, if I find the painting that Layla Z made of this bird, then it will corroborate that someone else has seen the bird. And that does not track because I'm like, you can paint anything you want, you know? It could be a fake bird anyway. So they go. But
I think the thing was Layla like painted real birds.
Well,
very
I know,
accurately. But still. But I understand your point. It would
not hold up in a court of law.
Yes.
But then they go. They meet this woman who has Alzheimer's. She's like, all of these paintings that she's been doing of the bird for years, because she's like, I could just never get it right. And it's pages and pages of this bird. And then finally, they tell you that the grandmother is there. Like, I didn't even know she was there. And I'm like, you're telling me.
I had to go back. They mentioned very quickly that, like, Nodder was like, I held her hand on the stoop.
I was so incensed. I was like, you brought along this woman who is meeting her long-lost lover again after years.
The grandmother who was also pretty sickly.
And they clarified that the grandmother married a man to have the children, to have, Nodder's family, and didn't love him. And wasn't sad when he died. So she's there, and you are going on and on while she stands in the back of the room about the bird painting. I could not believe it. Like, I got more and more mad that I had to be reading this book as I was reading it. And as we got here, I was just losing my mind. What do you mean? We were talking about the stupid fucking bird painting. Oh my God.
And then we didn't even touch on it. We didn't touch on it because I don't understand what happened with it. Why were the unprecedented number of birds mysteriously drawn to the New York City skies?
It's weird. Maybe 3 times in the book, there would be a mention of like, there's a ton of birds here. And I don't mean that in like, this is a weird thing that happened kind of way. I mean like in a magical realism kind of way.
Yeah.
It's honestly like Zeyn Joukhadar wrote this whole book and then turned it in, and they were about to send it off to the printers. And then one of the editors was like, actually, we want to be able to put the magical realism tag for this on Storygraph.
Yeah.
So can you please add in 2 paragraphs about like droves of hundreds of birds or something?
Yeah.
It was just so weirdly absent from the narrative.
Yeah. I don't know. This book was all in all very mid for me.
Yeah. I gave this a bad rating because I was just so sick of it by the end. I was so happy to be done with it.
Nodder's friends, I thought were so annoying. Listen, not to sound like a bitch, but if I saw someone voguing down the sidewalk in New York City, that's why I'm glad I don't live in New York City.
That's why we live in the boring city.
That's why
Washington,
we live in
D.C.,
where that doesn't happen, because I saw that. I had to set the book down and groan out loud because I was like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. I actually liked the friends just because I felt like they were the right quality of supportive.
No, but they were like very supportive, very good friends for every single journey Nodder was on in this book. But that one scene really made me annoyed.
Here's the scene that annoyed me. For most of the book, Nodder is struggling with his gender identity internally, not discussing it. Slowly, they begin to open up to their friends and family around them. Good. No problem. There's an element where he tells his sister, I am not a woman. Like, uses that terminology.
I'm actually not sure what pronouns we're supposed to be using. I've been saying he, him because that's what it says in the synopsis.
I think he is fine.
I think that's okay. We discussed this late, but it's fine. It's fine.
He tells his sister, I am not a woman. And the sister's reaction is to say, I am a bisexual woman, and I have chosen not to tell some people because whenever I have told someone, they've reacted poorly. It's very hard. Like, I hope you think about this very carefully because that's a difficult life and I wouldn't choose it for you. Something like that. Obviously, it's not good advice to be like, don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting and nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
So it was a compelling part of the narrative. What I didn't like about this scene is that the sister reveals that she has been with women before by putting her hair in a bun and revealing that she has an undercut and a neck tattoo.
Remember when Ashley got an undercut and then showed all of us? That's exactly what it was like.
No, that's different because Ashley has short hair.
Yeah.
The sister has like long, beautiful hair. So you're like, when your hair is down, you look like a straight woman, and then you put it up and then magically you've turned into a gay woman. What I wrote down is gay Sailor Moon transformation.
Yeah.
Like the imagery of it was just so tacky. And I feel like I can say that without sounding like I'm complaining that the sister was gay, because that's not what I'm complaining about.
It's also like, from my perspective as someone who is bisexual, it leans heavy into like stereotypical appearance stuff too.
Yeah,
which I don't love.
It felt very on the nose, and also if you had taken out that part, it would have been an equally emotionally impactful scene. I liked that part.
Yeah.
Not because it was, a feel-good section of the book or anything, because it certainly wasn't, but it rang true.
Yeah.
In a way. And that was a part of the book when I felt like the language was being effective. But then it's also, again, this problem of what I feel like is inappropriate or incorrect or ineffective use of imagery. Same thing as the birds.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've pinned down the issue. Is the imagery, I think.
I guess we have.
It's kind of like Fruit of the Drunken Tree, where the tree, we didn't know what it was.
I know.
Why it was there.
Whenever you bring that up, which we do every so often, I always am worried that it's like super obvious and we're just making ourselves sound stupider and stupider.
But no one's ever said anything, and no one else has read this book that I know.
Anyway, I was not happy with this book.
No.
And I'm happy to be done.
So should we get done with the discussion, get into the historical accuracy?
Yes, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because actually I feel like this is an interesting topic and time period for the book.
So because this book is like half and half is set in like around 1930-ish Syria, and the other half is in Little Syria, I thought I'd talk a bit about the situation in 1930s Syria, and then also about the history of Little Syria in New York City.
Wonderful.
So 1930 Syria, here we go. So Syria briefly had independence in 1920, and I mean like blip in time.
Like in 1920 and not 19 or 21.
Because immediately they were put under a French mandate in 1920 by the League of Nations.
That sucks.
So there are lots of revolts and fights for freedom throughout the 20s and 30s, which is a lot of why Lila's family left, along with a lot of other refugees and immigrants and, just people who didn't want to be in that environment, as it wasn't a good environment to be in. There was a treaty of independence negotiated in 1936, but it was not finalized because the French legislature refused to ratify it.
Oh.
So in 1946, after World War II, they finally gained independence after pressure from both revolts and from British powers against the French.
Okay.
French was like in a super weak state following World War II.
Well, I was going to say, if you can depend on one thing, it's that British people hate French people.
Exactly. So there was, and in Syria, even after this, there was a lot of political upheaval following independence. It was eventually put under like a one-party regime, I believe around the 60s or so. And that's where I ended my research because,
it seemed like it was not relevant any
longer.
No,
it seemed like it was not relevant any longer. However, what is relevant is the 1924 Immigration Act in the U.S., which significantly reduced immigration and made it incredibly difficult for most people, also specifically Arabic people, to come to the U.S. They set national quotas, things like that. This is typically what you hear about in reference to the Holocaust and turning away Jewish refugees when you hear about those quotas. This is the act that is typically referred to, but it also is very relevant in terms of Syrian migration and movement. Now let's get to Little Syria. So in 1800s, Arab immigrants began settling in Lower Manhattan near Battery Park. And for those who are not super familiar with New York, Battery Park is where you leave to take the ferry to go to Ellis Island.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Yes.
So all the way down.
Yes. It was eventually raised to make the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and later the World Trade Center.
Mm-hmm.
So it existed from around like 1880 is when they officially it had started earlier, but that was when it became like
when force. It was flourishing.
Yeah. And then it went through about like the 1940s. And many people worked in factories, peddling goods like cloth and religious items, which is what we see Lila doing in some of her sections. And then by around 1935, the influx of Syrian immigrants really started to decline around then. So there were still some coming in, but I think it was because, That was around when they initially negotiated the Treaty of Independence.
They were on their way, so people were not leaving Syria as much.
Exactly. But yeah, so that's the history of Little Syria.
Well, that's interesting. I did like the parts of the book that were about the community center that's like the last bastion of Little Syria that Nader and his mother were trying to save. It was not, again, I think just on top of everything else, it was just one more thing. But if that had been able to be fleshed out into kind of its own narrative, then I enjoyed that, because I like that drive to preserve history that already is less than you should have been able to preserve.
Oh, absolutely. I had some fun researching that historical accuracy. Syria is not a place I know a whole lot about, and it's not somewhere I've had the pleasure of researching for the pod yet.
Yeah.
And whether that's Syria itself as a country or Syrian communities in the U.S., always trying to learn more.
We have not visited our country list in a while. We should check in and see how many countries we've done.
I know. And what else we need to check on is the star calculator, because it is giving me issues right now, and it is not manually tabulating for me. So we will be doing some math. Luckily, it's all just averaging numbers, which is great.
And it's not Jeopardy, and we are allowed to have calculators.
Thank God. I'm pulling mine out right now. But as I do that, the categories are, much like Jeopardy, we need the little ding noise.
Oh my gosh.
Historical accuracy, originality, characters, prose, and vibe. I can go first if you want me to.
I would love that.
Historical accuracy, I gave it a 4. I really liked what was in there. I felt it couldn't go full points because it was like a half and half.
Mm-hmm.
Originality, I gave it a 3 because this sounds mean. It tried really hard to be original. Like the novel tried really hard to be original. And just like those imagery elements that would have, and like the magical realism that really would have strengthened that originality in the novel, fell flat for me. So I evened it out. I said, good effort. I said, this is not a story that's told this is not a community that has this many like mainstream big name books like this about it. So it's still original to me. Mm-hmm. Characters, I gave them a 2. I liked Lila. That was, everyone else. No one really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Prose, I gave it a 4. I really liked the prose. I thought it served the themes of the novel well. However, it was a hindrance at times. Finally, vibes, a 2. I just was not really for me. So that was a 3, and I gave it a 3.5 on Storygraph. So that is a definite fine.
Okay. For me, historical accuracy, 4. Same reasons as you. Okay. Originality, 4. I do think it is pretty original. Not in like a mind-blowing way, but just the combination of ideas I do think is nice, including the bird element, which is not something that you see every day, but clearly Zeyn Joukhadar was passionate enough about to make it central. Mm-hmm. Characters, 2. I don't like them. Sorry. Even like Layla, I was just like neutral. Like I'm not going to think about her again. Really?
Yeah.
Prose, I guess I'm going to go 3, because I was going to say part of me was tempted to go lower, because it's not often that I think the prose actually hinders the quality of a book, but it was nice. So I think I'm going to be happy to settle at 3.
Okay.
And then vibes, 1. When I'm reading a book and I think like, what's the point of this? That's pretty scathing.
I guess you into DNF territory.
Yeah.
And we're not legally allowed to DNF anything for the pod, because trust me, I would have already done that twice this season.
We don't let ourselves.
Not in things we've recorded, because clearly I did not and would not have DNF'd Gwen and Art.
But that is a 2.8. And on Storygraph, I gave this a 2.5. So for me, it is a flop.
Oof. All right. Well, is that your first? No, was Fellow Travelers a flop for you?
I gave that a fine leaning flop. So this is my first flop.
First true flop of the season from Grace.
So now we're tied.
We're tied.
1 flop each. I didn't even give Gwen and Art a flop.
There might be a tiebreaker next week. I don't know. I did not see what you scored on Storygraph.
It'll be a surprise.
What are we reading next week?
We are reading The Persian Boy by Mary Renault.
Yes, and Mary Renault and I have a long-standing history with one another. So looking forward to discussing that. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, _pod. You can also join our Storygraph reading challenge for the season, and you can recommend us books for future seasons by filling out the recommendation form in the bios of any of our social medias. And you know what was so funny is when we were planning the list of books this season, we're like, man, we really got to make sure we have flops. Like, we have not had a ton of flops. We overloaded ourselves. This is, we, just so you know, we don't think actually that books about gay people are bad. We just did a bad job arranging them in the season. Yeah, our arrangement order. We'll work on that. Here's something. Here, I'm going to say actually straight up, I thought I would like this. I really thought I would like this book, too. I thought this was going to be great, which is why I put it here, because I didn't think Fellow Travelers was going to be good. This is definitely, I think, one of the biggest shocks for me. But anyways, we're not done with our sign-off spiel. If you have anything else you want to talk to us about, if you have a book you do like you want us to read, if you want to bash our opinions, you can go ahead and email us, fiberflopodcast@gmail.com.
And in the meantime,
happy reading!
Bye!